The story will be told from the perspective of the main female character. I used to believe that the day we graduated would finally level the playing field between me and my sister. We both stepped across the same stage, dressed in identical robes, and listened to the same applause echo through the crowd. But only one of us completed that journey without drowning in debt or working exhausting night shifts to stay afloat. My parents covered every expense for my sister's education and bought her whatever expensive thing she asked for. All I ever received from them was the same line they had repeated my entire life. "You were always the strong one." For years, I believed that sentence meant something good. I believed it until the day they arrived at our graduation ceremony smiling proudly, only for those smiles to fade the moment they realized what I had achieved without their help. My name is Maya. For most of my life, people assumed my quiet nature meant I was strong. I grew up in a small house in Oregon where the walls seemed filled with expectations instead of warmth. The love my parents gave my sister appeared easy and limitless, like sunlight pouring through every window. My sister was the shining star, the child they proudly presented to the world. I was simply the other one, the one who stayed out of the spotlight and learned very early how to hide her hurt behind silence. Some of my earliest memories carry a strange heaviness. One Christmas when we were 7 years old, my sister unwrapped a towering dollhouse that was nearly as tall as she was. Tiny electric lights inside it glowed like real windows in miniature rooms. When it was my turn, I opened a small package. Inside was a thin notebook and a single pen. My mother smiled gently and said, "You're the writing type, sweetie." I pretended to be excited. That night, I held the notebook tightly in my arms, not because it felt special, but because it was the only thing I had. Another memory followed the same pattern. My sister once scraped her knee after falling from the backyard slide. The scratch was tiny, barely visible, but my mom rushed outside shouting her name like the world was collapsing. She told that story to the neighbors for days. Around that same time, I fell from the apple tree in our yard and hit the ground so hard my vision blurred for a moment. My father looked out the window and shrugged. "Maya's tough," he said. "She'll handle it." That sentence became the rule that defined my childhood. "You're tough, you'll manage. You don't need what others need." The only person who never treated me like a piece of stone was my grandmother. She lived in Montana and visited only a few times each year, but when she did, those visits felt like stepping into a patch of sunlight after a long winter. One afternoon, my sister was proudly showing off a new bracelet covered in sparkling crystals. My grandmother quietly slipped something into my hand. It was a small wooden hair clip. On the back, my name had been carefully carved into the wood. She leaned close and whispered, "It's not fancy, but it's one of a kind, just like you." I wore that clip whenever I felt invisible. It reminded me that somewhere in the world, someone actually saw me. School didn't change anything at home. I studied hard, earned the highest grades, and won several writing competitions. My sister painted simple sunflower drawings that my parents pinned proudly to the refrigerator. When I won a district-wide academic award, my mom barely glanced up from the stove. But when my sister earned a B+ in history, my mother invited neighbors over to celebrate. Eventually, I learned to process my feelings quietly. By the time we entered college, our roles were already decided. My parents paid every cent of my sister's tuition. They bought her a brand new laptop, sent her a monthly allowance of $1,200, and rented her an apartment she never had to clean. I moved into a damp basement dorm room and worked 3 jobs just to survive. Whenever I called home and admitted I was struggling, my mom repeated the same words. "You've always been the strong one, Maya." She said it as if it were praise, but what it really meant was simple. No one was coming to help me. Those college years didn't destroy me. But they transformed me. My sister treated those 4 years like a vacation. She bought new clothes, went on weekend trips, and posted endless photos of restaurants and parties with friends. Meanwhile, I learned exactly how much life costs. I woke before sunrise to clean classroom floors. In the afternoons, I tutored high school students. Late at night, I worked shifts at the library. I tracked every dollar in a tiny notebook. I calculated how many hours I needed to work just to pay $60 for gas or $100 for groceries. My sister never asked if I was okay. Sometimes she waved from across campus, surrounded by a crowd of laughing friends. It always looked like the world was determined to make her happy. When she complained about exams, my mother told her gently, "Don't push yourself too hard, honey." but when I mentioned juggling 3 jobs, my mother used that same distant tone. "You've always been the strong one, Maya. You'll manage." To her, being strong meant I didn't require help. One afternoon during my 3rd year, I finished 4 exhausting hours shelving books when I noticed my parents' car parked outside the student center. For a moment, excitement rushed through me. I thought they had come to see me, but when I stepped outside, my sister was already hugging them. They had brought her a brand new bag as a surprise gift. They barely noticed me standing nearby with sweat on my shirt from work. My dad waved casually. My mom said, "Oh, sweetie, didn't see you there. You look tired. Sloane needs help choosing her classes." Could you give her advice? Advice. My effort was useful, but only as a tool for helping my sister. Moments like that happened constantly. They were small cuts that never killed me but still made everything ache. Still, I kept moving forward. I studied late into the night and applied for opportunities even when I doubted myself. I built my future piece by piece with my own effort, even though no one expected me to succeed. By my final year, I stopped waiting for my parents to care about my progress. When I was accepted into a special accounting seminar, I celebrated alone with a cheap muffin from the campus cafe. When Professor Miller praised my research reports, I simply smiled and rode my rusty bicycle back to my room. Graduation was approaching quickly. It felt like the finish line of a long race. But it also carried a strange sadness. It marked the end of being overlooked, yet it also confirmed that nothing I did had changed my parents' feelings toward me. My sister talked endlessly about graduation photos. My mom had already chosen her outfit. My dad joked about how emotional he would be when my sister crossed the stage. No one mentioned me. Deep down, I started to understand a truth. If they hadn't noticed me yet, they never would. The week before graduation should have felt like a triumph. Instead, it felt hollow. I had spent 4 years rebuilding myself through long nights and endless work, yet standing at the finish line, I felt more invisible than ever. While my sister spent her days choosing hairstyles and planning photos, I took extra shifts just to pay the last of my bills. My parents never asked if I needed help buying my cap and gown. They never asked if I had transportation to the ceremony or if I wanted to celebrate with dinner afterward. One evening after finishing a tutoring session, I stepped outside into the cold air and checked my phone. There was a message from my mom. "Hey, sweetie. We're thinking about taking Sloane out for a graduation brunch afterward. You should come if you're free." If I was free, as if I were simply an extra guest, as if the day had nothing to do with me. I didn't reply immediately. I walked slowly back to my dorm room. The hallway lights flickered and the paint peeled from the walls. I sat on the edge of my bed and picked up the wooden hair clip Grandma Rose had given me years earlier. I hadn't worn it in a long time. For years, it reminded me of all the things I wanted but believed I didn't deserve. But that night, it felt different in my hand. It wasn't a reminder of loss. It was proof that someone had truly seen me once. The next morning, something inside me shifted. I wasn't angry. I was simply clear. I opened an email I had been saving for weeks. It was a message from my department informing me that I would be receiving an award during the ceremony. It wasn't flashy, but it mattered. It carried my name and recognized my hard work. And I had earned it completely on my own. I never told my parents, partly because they never asked about my achievements, and partly because I didn't want to watch them treat it like it meant nothing. As graduation day approached, I felt strangely calm. I wasn't hoping they would notice me. I wasn't rehearsing speeches or waiting for approval. I didn't need their praise anymore. I ironed my graduation robe by myself, made a cheap cup of coffee, and looked at my reflection in the mirror. I didn't see the daughter. They forgot. I saw a woman who made it through everything. Graduation wouldn't fix the past, but it was the moment I stopped carrying that weight. My parents didn't know it, but they were about to get a big shock. The morning of the ceremony was very sunny. The grass looked bright and the old brick buildings looked beautiful. Students were everywhere in their robes and honors cords. They were hugging and shouting and taking pictures to try and remember the moment. I walked to the ceremony grounds by myself. My robe was a little loose on my shoulders because it was used, but it felt right. I earned it. I found my seat in the rows of chairs under a big arch of flowers. While I fixed the tassel on my hat, I heard someone shout my name. "There she is." My parents waved like I was the one who had been missing all morning. My sister was standing between them. She looked great in a new white dress under her robe. Her makeup was perfect and she looked like someone who never had to worry about anything. My mom ran over to me first. Sweetie, you should have told us where you were sitting. We almost lost you in the crowd. I just gave her a polite smile. I was just getting settled. My sister looked at my mom and said, "We already took pictures by the fountain. You have to see them. They turned out so good." "I think I'll frame the one with Dad." My dad said very proudly, "That's the one, my graduate. They never even asked if I wanted to be in a photo." When the ceremony started, the leader of the school welcomed everyone. He thanked the people who gave money and the teachers. He told the parents they were wonderful for supporting their kids. I almost laughed. To me, support was just a story people told. It wasn't for everyone. It was only for the favorites. The students started walking across the stage to get their diplomas. My heart started beating fast. I knew what was coming, even if my parents didn't. When my sister's name was called, my mom made a loud sound and put her hands on her chest. My dad stood up to take a bunch of pictures. My sister walked like she was performing for a camera. She blew a kiss toward them before she sat back down. My mom wiped her eyes and said, "That's our girl." They had never said that about me. The ceremony went on until the announcer reached the part for special awards. My heart started beating even faster. The dean spoke clearly into the microphone. He said, "Before we give out the last diplomas, we want to honor a student for her amazing grades and her work for the department. She earned the award for being the best in accounting this year." I felt the change in the air even before he said my name. Then he said, "This year's winner is Maya." A lot of people clapped loudly. Some students near me even cheered, but the only thing I really heard was the silence behind me. I turned my head just a little and saw them. My parents looked like they were frozen. My sister was not smiling anymore. She looked confused and strange. My mom's hands were stuck in the air like she wanted to clap but couldn't. My dad's face looked tight and very pale. I walked up to the stage, and every step I took made me feel stronger. I felt tall even though I was wearing flat shoes. When the leader of the school handed me the award, I didn't look at the cameras. I looked right at the audience and saw my parents. For the first time ever, they looked very small to me. After everything was over, students were everywhere with their families. People were laughing and taking lots of photos. I stayed near the back of the crowd. My family walked up to me slowly. They looked like they weren't sure if they should be there. My mom was the first to speak. She didn't sound happy or proud. She sounded confused. She asked, "Maya, why didn't you tell us?" I looked her right in the eyes and said, "You never asked." It was the simplest truth I ever said. It felt like a heavy rock falling into water. It brought up all the years of them ignoring me and calling me the strong one instead of being their daughter. My dad cleared his throat and said, "We just didn't realize you were doing all that. You always seemed fine." I looked at him and said quietly, "I had to seem fine. You only check on the ones who seem fragile." My mom looked like she was hurt by my words. My sister stepped closer and whispered, "Maya, we didn't know. I didn't know." I believed my sister more than I believed my parents. She never had to think about how the family worked because everything was always done for her. Before I could say anything back, a woman in a nice suit walked up to me. She held out her hand to shake mine. She said, "Maya, I'm Sarah. I saw your work with the professor. If you want to, I'd love to talk to you about a job at our office in New York." It felt like a door was finally opening for me. I shook her hand and said, "I'm definitely open to talking." Sarah gave me a warm smile and walked away. The four of us just stood there in a very uncomfortable silence. My dad tried to act normal again and said, "New York, that's big. Maybe we can help you figure things out." I stopped him right away and said gently, "I've been figuring things out on my own for a long time." My mom tried to grab my arm and said, "Maya, honey, we're proud of you. Of course we are." I stepped back and said, "Pride isn't something you get to announce when it's convenient." I wasn't angry. I was just telling the truth. My sister had tears in her eyes. She looked like a little kid who was lost. She asked softly, "Are we okay?" I took a deep breath and said, "We will be, but not today. Today belonged to me and the woman I had become." I walked away from them and the sun hit the wooden clip in my hair. I knew they were still standing there, shocked by the reality they had created. For the first time, their silence didn't make me feel bad. Being strong wasn't an excuse to leave me behind anymore. It was my power. I stayed on a quiet bench for a while and watched the sun go down. My phone was full of messages from friends and teachers, but there was nothing from my parents. I wasn't surprised. 2 days later, my sister sent me a text. It said, "I'm sorry. I didn't see things the way you did. I want to understand." I waited and then replied, "Take your time." A week later, I went to New York. I walked through the big city with my papers and my wooden hair clip. Nobody there knew my past, and that made me feel free. Every step I took was mine alone. Being the strong one used to be their excuse, but now it was the life I built with my own hands. If this story felt familiar to you, please leave a comment and share your ideas. Also, make sure to subscribe so you can catch more stories just like this one.